Again, everyone who is watching this is part 2 of our podcast this week. If you're here from, Diamond's YouTube channel, you've already seen the first part of this. If you haven't, please go over there. Please check this out so that some of these make more sense, because I know several of these are based on the topics we've discussed this week. But now that disclaimer is out of the way, without further ado, let's get into the QA. So I had 2 from last week that I'm going to burn through really quick, because these are questions that one was kind of funny. The other one was just a little bit of information. So the first one is, what does ELO kibble taste like? It does not taste like elves. It tastes like sacred herbs. That is the flavor that it is based on from the video game. So I imagine it's probably going to be something very herbaceous. Maybe Italian seasoning would be a good sort of thing to consider the flavor as, if they haven't somehow reinterpreted that to be like nacho cheese or something. The second question was, when does DLC drop? Yeah, you found your way in, I see. So DLC drops usually near the end of the month. It's usually in the last week and a half. But it's usually the 20-something-th of a month.
Well, when we get to the next big dungeon of Final Fantasy 14, that's when it's going to drop. I'm watching you, Rob. I'm watching you.
Rob, if you're watching us, we understand the pattern. We've seen through the pattern OTG uses. When we run a dungeon on Diamond's stream, you drop a DLC. Which coincidentally we might hit a dungeon tomorrow night in 14.
Sadly, tomorrow night I have to work a 12-hour shift because yeah. However, I'm thinking I'll be going for a little while.
You may still hit it. You're not that far.
Day.
You're not that far from it. You're not that far from it. So you may hit it. So if our theory is correct, guys, look, tomorrow, as we're recording this, it'll be tomorrow. But if we were right, for those of you listening on a recorded version of this podcast, 3/21, that is the date to look. If it is, we figured your pattern out, guys. But for real though, generally it's somewhere in like the 20s of a month, right? Like the 20, somewhere like 21st onward, we start looking for it.
The only exception to DLC drops is when we have a expansion drop.
Actually, there are two exceptions.
What's the other exception?
The other exception is April Fool's Day, because we get it the week of April Fool's, if not the day of.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But if we get a supplement book like Black Chrome or Danger Gala or something, there's a DLC, and they usually count it as the DLC for the month that comes out, and that's the
king from the RTG Discord.
What?
Oh, never mind. Okay, I thought we were about to get spited or something. No, it's just someone pinging me over there. Okay.
It's like I was like, what? Are we about to do this live? That's hilarious. Yeah, Rob's like, I'm just gonna spite you. We're releasing the DLC now. But yeah, so we are expecting, as of the recording of this episode, we are expecting a DLC will probably drop sometime in the next week or so, and then we'll get another one shortly after, because April Fool's is right around the corner at this point. So with that in mind, keep an eye out, because we'll probably we have a hunch based on some key art drop for something else that we might be dealing with cryptocurrency as our April Fool's DLC this year. So
oh boy, I can't wait to lose money.
So
all right,
yeah.
Next question.
But yeah, next question after that. How do you write lighter gigs? Because we did talk about how to talk about more emotionally resonant kind of things.
Lighter gigs, oh gosh. It would be easier to show than just tell, but usually lighter gigs are going to be very much, you look at one session and, for example, a scream sheet. Scream sheets don't tend to have like a lot of action in them, but don't tend to have a lot of like emotional consequence to how they play out. I guess, for example, a fine example is Red Chrome Cargo. If you play Red Chrome Cargo, it is a point A to point B, done in 3-hour mission. And there isn't much of a emotional consequence because you are just getting paid. It doesn't really impact you personally.
Yeah, that's true. Like, it's very, very impersonal. It's very like you're gonna just shoot a couple red chrome gangers and their leader, get your shit back off the train, and that's the gig. However, the flip of that, we have gigs like Reaping the Reaper and the kind of trilogy that it's part of, talking about the death of someone's child and that person wanting revenge. And that's like the impetus for the gig. Yep. So
Digital Divas, Burn It Down.
And you get a mix in there too. You kind of have a mix in there because Digital Divas is pretty lighthearted as a gig. It's mostly like, hey, there's been some arson at our shows lately. Can you please make sure that doesn't happen?
Then you get that weird encounter at the end.
Yeah, and then you get a weird encounter at the end, and that kind of links into the rest of it. There's another really good scream sheet to show something a little more lighthearted without it being like inconsequential, which is oh shoot, what's the name of it? It's in the core rulebook. It's the gig is I think it's the Big Break is the name of it. Not to be confused with Break the Box. The Big Break is a gig where a gun designer who has made a name for themselves online riffing off of Sanru's designs has entered a contest they've somehow gotten their opportunity to put their designs in front of Sanru's R&D, and they ask the crew to be bodyguards because they've had some weird kind of stalker kind of chasing them online lately, and they want to make sure nothing bad happens when they go to get the designs in front of Sanru. And they promise payment by way of whatever Sanru pays them because they're so sure they're gonna get paid, on the other end of this. And there's an element of that which is very like, yeah, it's kind of like you're just being bodyguard for this random artist. And there's like some cartoon drones that you end up having to fight partway through the gig. That's like kind of goofy.
Yeah.
It
definitely, Discom.
Yeah.
Definitely probably not, Disney by any means.
Right. Totally not.
Gosh. Oh goodness, yeah. So with these different like scream sheets, especially like if you want something that's just light, aim for something that can be done within like that 3-hour gig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have like a one shot, like, and I mean that not so much as like you don't connect it into your wider campaign or whatever, because I do think Cyberpunk Red shines brightest as a campaign based game. But if you have like occasional like one shot gigs where they don't necessarily have to have a ton of consequences wound up on them, those usually end up feeling lighter, and the ones where like your players are capable of taking them on, they end up feeling lighter, even if the content inside isn't like goofy or inconsequential. I will say there's no such thing as an inconsequential Cyberpunk gig. There's always a consequence somewhere in it, and the GM's job is to find the consequence within what seems pretty limited in scope or lighthearted. But with that said, they also won't feel as heavy as like, yeah, this AI nearly killed the city, and you were the very thin line standing between the potential of that happening and not happening, right? The reality where it doesn't happen and the possibility of it potentially could have happened, like your party was the difference maker. Not everything is a world-ending threat, especially in this game. So less lighthearted, but instead more one-shotty. Yeah, like, because you don't have as much time to stack consequence and weight onto it if you can get in and get out in one session, right? Like, those are inherently going to be more lightweight gigs. which is really what we're talking about there in the context of Cyberpunk. So like the impetus or the hook of it can be on the darker or lighter end. It doesn't really matter where you start, but on the other side of it, it can be, you know, like you're not going to feel the weight of whatever that is in the same way you would if it's like a 3-session gig, right? Or rather, the other way you could look at it is like, if it doesn't link heavily into the rest of the themes you're presenting as your broader campaign. Like this last week on Neon Inferno, for example, I had a gig where the player's whole job was go to the old NC Medical Center, get this distillery rig for this drug cook, bring it back to her. Easy in, out, no one really, like, it's not this gloom and doom that's kind of hanging over them. It's a whole separate thing that's completely unrelated. And even though they're like killing their way through a hot zone hideout of these scavs, like it's still light. It's not going to be this thing where they're like worried about what is this going to do on the other end as much, right? It's not dealing with their big question right now. Yeah, so that would be, I guess, my advice. So Diamond, did you have anything more to add about how do you write lighter gigs?
I don't.
You don't. Okay. Prepper Jack, if you want to see a lighthearted GM, check out River the Bard VT.
Yeah.
Always chaotic and funny. There's perhaps an extra level of difficulty involved due to unpredictability involved. Yeah, that could be a good source of inspiration. There's another actual play that happened a while ago called The Fast and the Furriest. That was that was advertised pretty heavily on RTG's channel, or in their website and stuff. And I know that was literally, it's like The Fast and the Furious, like inspired, but the cast were all bio-exotic. So you had Finn Diesel, who was a shark, and the like it was chaotic and hilarious. That's more the kind of thing. It's more Mad Max, less Blade Runner when you're talking about it, because it's more that spectacle and less of the existential. That's the way I would kind of look at it and consider it.
Next on the line, how do you make players harpy? Oh,
yeah. What do you do to coax role playing out of your players?
Oh. I believe that players should be able to, step forward once they're comfortable. Mm-hmm. And one of the best things, and we talked about this really early on in, for those of you guys on YouTube, on my half of the episode, we talked about making sure that the table is a comfortable environment. Mm-hmm. You can't make someone do something. You lead a horse to water, can't make them drink. But I believe, like, once they're in a comfortable environment where they are with people that they know it is safe to do so, you do so. And of course, also reward it. Honestly, improvement points for someone having, a good attempt of roleplay, it's worth rewarding to them. Oh,
yeah.
Here, typing.
No, I'm just changing my topic in the topic box real quick, so that way. I just realized, I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. there's a whole, like, we're talking about stuff, and I just want to make sure that my box reflects that. Okay. As far as my tips for making players role play more, I think it, like Diamond's saying, it starts with trust. It starts with that, like, safe atmosphere you build at your table. If you're a GM and you're afraid that you're not able to bring, or that players aren't bringing themselves to the table ready to role play, understand that, number one, it doesn't happen immediately, especially with new players. It took me like a solid year and a half before I felt really comfortable role playing characters that weren't highly representative of me and my personal opinions on things and my personal viewpoints and things. Like me playing Uncle Larry, I play Uncle Larry fairly antithetical to like who I am as a person in real life. I find myself to be very empathetic, very altruistic, very like, I will try to help you if I can, regardless of if there's like an offer for a reward for that or not. Like I want to genuinely just help people, right? Whereas Uncle Larry is pretty much the opposite. Like he's like, I don't want to help you unless I get something out of it. I don't want to do things that aren't for my own self-interest. And so like that, especially if you have a player who is struggling with roleplay, or who expresses before you make a character with them that they might struggle with roleplay, what I would suggest is to advise the player to play a character that is more in line with their personal beliefs and characteristics, because that does help. Because then you're not really playing this other person. You're playing yourself with some minor tweaks to fit the setting. And that makes it less of a challenge and less of an issue, kind of leaning into the role play. As far as like scenario based role play, like how do you make someone do that? I think offering consequences, like a benefit if they give you a good reason for something. Like if you bring up to the exec that you're trying to negotiate with, like, look, this deal you've made, all it's doing is hurting people. And when people are hurting, it's not profitable. So why would you fight this way or argue that this is a good thing when you're just hurting your own profit margins? If a player made that argument to me, instead of just having them roll a business check, I'd say, okay, that'll be a business check, but I'm going to give you a +2, right? Like encourage them by giving them a benefit when they do something right, you know? Or like Diamond mentioned, IP is another really great one. Although, there's this, and I don't mean this in a way to like dehumanize players, when I say this, but there's this concept in training animals where like, if you're trying
Pavlov.
Pavlov to an extent, but it's this idea of like, if your cat, like, cause I have 2 cats, right? If your cat doesn't use the litter box and instead they take crap on the floor, it's like, that's a problem. And you want the cat to understand that that's not something you should be doing. It doesn't help to punish the cat when you find it unless you found the cat in the act of it. If you punish the cat while it's doing that, it will understand that your punishment is directly in response to this thing, right? But if you don't do that, then you punish them later, they won't understand that that's the reason they're being punished. Reward works the same way. It's like if you reward them in the moment, right then and there, they understand, oh, the reward is being given as a direct result that I've done this thing, right? But if you don't reward them until later, they might not remember, like, oh, that's why I'm getting rewarded this. So my one caution with IP is if you're giving them bonus IP for it, make sure they're aware that this is the reason, right? You're giving them a very spelled out specific reason, like this is why.
It's more when, you know, I see that like really good first, like honest attempt. It'll be, you know, foreseeing you finally start, foreseeing you give this an attempt, I'm giving you this IP. So that way, it's made to be an isolated incident.
Sure, and you could do that too. Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. But yeah,
but trying to get people to roleplay. I'm so sorry, Emmerron.
No, you're good. No, go ahead. I talk a lot, so I'm fine.
And, you know, Prepper Jack here brings up a good point. You know, first, probably make a conscious effort to lead by example. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's always a good step to take. One of the other steps that I recommend taking when encouraging your players to RP is, you know, even above table, like, hey guys, I would like to see this leading into session. If you're not comfortable, it's okay. but it is encouraged.
Sure. I think Prepper Jack, the like elaboration he puts on his thing though, of because this might, I think, be a, because I agree that like setting an expectation is a good idea. Leading by example is the GM. In other words, like role play the characters. You don't have to do all the funny voices if you don't, have the ability to. I know like sometimes like there's some voices I start doing for a character, I'm like, I can't keep that up, it'll kill my voice. But like being willing to like inflect at least with your own voice, like, look, if you don't give me what I want, I am going to flatline you. That is non-negotiable. I'm going to empty my fucking gun into you. And that's where this conversation ends. Or you give me what I want, and then we can all walk away happy. So you tell me, what's it going to be? Do I have to flatline you here, or will you be reasonable? And like, if you do that, and it doesn't have to match like my actual demeanor. Again, I try to be very friendly, very, very like positive, bubbly, however you describe that, right? But like, if I do that even in my own voice, like that is going to bring your players right down into that point of like, oh, the GM's role playing, like even in their own voice, they're going to want to do the same, because then it immerses you, right? That immersion is where a lot of that role play comes from.
You mean to tell me that you're not just some slimy exec over there, darling? Anyway.
See, if you can do the funny voices, it also helps. Because that's like, Diamond and I will do that to each other in chat sometimes when it's just two of us hanging out. We'll just be like she'll pull her Alan Jameson voice out of fucking nowhere, and it's like, it's just
oh gosh. All right. Look, all I'm saying is, if you just want your players to RP, all you gotta do is look them in the eye real good. You gotta give them that smile. And tell them just tell them what that character's saying. All right. Anyway, character, yeah, that is my conspiracy theorist from my setting.
But yeah, I mean, just being able to like do that is a big thing, right? Like that is a huge element that I think most GMs don't quite understand, like how important, even if players are like, hey, like, I don't want to make a big deal out of whatever the scene is or whatever, we can kind of like skip over it. There are times where that's appropriate, like if they're just going around like buying stuff pre-session or whatever. If you don't want the characters they're doing that with to become hooks later, you can kind of overlook it. But I will say that if you go the extra mile there and you do role play those characters, those are tools in your toolbox that you can always reserve for use later, and then your players get attached to certain vendors and things. Like the medtech in my setting right now, Pan, they are someone that my players regularly go to now, and whenever they walk in and they're shot up or missing limbs or something, she's like, what the fuck happened? Like, what did you do? Like,
I look away from you for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and it's like it adds personality to the setting, and now it's not just, oh yeah, we're gonna go to the Ripper and get these mechanical bits patched up, like mechanics as in game mechanics. You're like, oh, this person's actually concerned about your well-being, right? It's not about just the therapy; it's who's the therapist. That's the thing in my real life game that I'm a player in, where one of the other players is like, he was like at 2 humanity, and this therapist we've worked with before, like in the setting, she's the wife of Rex Royale. She comes down and she's like, look, you're on the fucking brink. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You need intensive therapy if you're going to have any hope of recovering from this. But like, all of this is role played, and it makes us care, and it makes us want to role play back. So I think it's like you sharpen each other in that regard. You role play, they'll role play back. When you don't just describe everything passively, they won't either. And it brings that out, even if it even if they have to come out of their shell a little bit, like it takes 3 or 4 times of you really sinking into the role play as the GM, you'll be rewarded for it long term. Because after like the first session or two, players will start kind of like, oh, okay, I get it now. I feel comfortable doing this now. It becomes an exercise rather than a like, oh, I don't know, I'm nervous about that. To do that and I might do it wrong and God, they'll judge me. They lose that sense because they see you doing it so much that they're like, I want to join that fun. It becomes this thing that's aspirational. All right. So we've still got about 20 minutes here, I think. So we can go to the next one here. So the next one, so this, I summarized this a little bit. So this was brought up by Logan in my chat. How do you end a section, so like what I would call a chapter arc or the entire campaign, making an emotional impact? He asked it like, do you use like a near TPK to get that resonance? How do you get like that kind of weight at the end of a big, either the campaign's end or like a big chapter within the campaign? How do you pull that, the impact of that into a scene? How do you do that?
So I suppose best way to pull from example is we look at Law and Disorder. We just finished a major chapter over there.
Yep.
This one person that they've been pursuing since the beginning of campaign, that, you know, it kind of went into the background for a while but came back. There was, you know, the way I see it is the climax needs to be very monumental. Like in a setting like Night City, people have to hear something about it. It has to have at least shook up the, you know, the atmosphere around it a little bit.
Yep.
So this one being, you know, a ship has been, you know, blown up like just north of Little Europe. You know, one of the really safe neighborhoods in Night City. And now, you know, giant fucking explosion. And on top of that, 3 trauma team AVs. So 15 trauma team personnel dead. And, you know, many other bodies. Countless number of people dead. But, you know, that always there needs to be, with climaxes, there has to be a tangible large cost in these cyberpunk games. Mm-hmm. Something, a big cost has to get paid, and somebody pays it, whether the players are going to collect that payment or the players are the ones paying that price.
Mm-hmm. Like I would say, go ahead, Devin. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, you know, like, let's look at, you know, the finale of Neon Inferno.
Okay, good. Our brain cell was working together there. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because with Neon Inferno, my goal wasn't to TPK my party. There were a couple of elements that went into that, though, that I don't know if that's entirely indicative of what I would recommend for every campaign. But it does leave you some tools. So thing number one, Erica, one of the players in that game, she came to me about a month before the finale and was like, we have this nuke. I don't like that. I want to take the nuke out of the party's hands. I want to sneak it away so they can't use it in the way that we're starting to talk. Are there nomads in the camp that would agree with that? And I'm like, yeah, there's a whole faction of people who think this is a bad idea. Their leader is one of them. And she's like, good. I want to take this off the table then with their help if we can arrange that. And so I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We are going to make you roll a bunch of checks all at once when the time comes. And if enough of those are successful, and I will determine which ones are the critical ones, then you get away with the initiation of that. Like, the plan starts going, the players might have a chance to catch you, right? Because obviously you'll be with them for at least part of it. But when the time comes, we see what happens. So this led to some tension in that last episode then, where like she leaves One Direction with one of these nomads that she's arranged this with. The others are heading to the Militech base up in NorCal, and suddenly the party splits because she's gone to run away with this nuke, and the rest of the team, other than I think 2 of them, went to this place where this is supposed to be happening because their friends are there. And so now you've got this giant situation where like the plan starts falling apart, right? So that's maybe thing number 1. The plan can fall apart. Whether by player action or by the NPCs doing something unexpected, the plan can fall apart, and that can be your complication. Thing number 2, you could push your players to a limit, right? You know that if you throw a certain number of things against them, eventually something will stick and they will start falling off. And then they have to start making choices. They have to choose, do I sacrifice my arm? Do I sacrifice my leg? Like, so they have to decide who lives, who dies. Whether that's them or NPCs or a combination. Like, when the choice of, well, who's going to get out of this thing is brought up, that's a big question, right? Again, look to 2077. There's some great instances of like deciding who gets to live and who gets to die at several points in that story. And those are the kinds of consequences I think that are deserving of like the end of a chapter or a whole campaign even. But yeah, that's kind of like the way I look at it, is like, I want my players to feel the raw impact one way or another. Diamond, did you have anything kind of additional you want to add on to that?
When it comes to the closure of a chapter or a campaign, make sure that when you get there, either you leave important questions unanswered or you answer every question at the end of a campaign. Mm-hmm. Because maybe the way you want to end a campaign, and this can really vary from group to group, maybe it's, what if I didn't kill this person? Or did this person happen to know something? What if I didn't do this? Or every consequence that was part of that main story finally piles up, and you get to see the consequence of every action that brought you to this point.
Yep. That's I think like the 2077 route is like culmination and then resolution. But I've definitely had campaigns that ended on like it's funny because Neon Inferno ended this way, but my first ever campaign that I ran ended with a nuke in the middle of the city, where the Biotechnica campus got bombed by the players. And it's because a rogue AI took their fixer's mind way earlier on in the campaign after something they did. And from that point on, everything their fixer, the main fixer they were working for, everything he had them do was a like furtherance of this plot to get revenge on Biotechnica for something that had happened before the Fourth Corporate War. And when they finally did his bidding, I made sure to drive home. You think of all the people that were close enough to that blast, they're probably dead, or at the very least you hurt them so badly that they might die far before they should have. And you're directly responsible for that, all of you. And the fixer just looked at them and says, thank you for your help in getting my revenge. I'll sleep easier tonight. And they had to determine for themselves whether they liked that as the outcome or not, right? There was a point where one of the players straight up just they went and they deleted themselves at the end of it. They were not happy with it at all. One of the players
characters, right? Characters, right?
Oh, characters. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm like, oh.
You're like, Emmerron, you're talking about that way too nonchalantly. Yeah. No. I don't mean the player themselves. The player chose to delete one of their characters because they're like, yeah, I don't see a point in continuing on because I've just done this horrible thing. And I'm like, yes, you have. And at the time, I was like, that is a very appropriate reaction, I think, to this horrible thing you've just done. Like, despite the fact you got away with what? you know, like, but yeah, no, what are the characters that one of the players? It's always hard to keep the specificity in mind when we're talking about this.
So yeah, when it comes to ending a chapter campaign, a big impact that shows a result of everything that led up to that point.
Yeah.
All right.
Or answers a question, or asks a question you want to resonate with your group. Both are good results. Whatever you do, should do one of them.
We got 10 minutes till we could probably knock out these last two questions for the night.
Okay. Let me start on the second one, if you don't mind, just because that one's pretty brief, just to make sure we can get to that. So how strong should a media skills be on the social fabric of a setting? Like, how much change should a media make? That depends on the media's rank.
Yeah, it does what it says on the 10. If you jump over to... let me go grab the page.
Yeah, it's like page 140 something, I think, for the media.
Let's see, 151.
Yeah.
So media's their impact will always be scale alongside them. So for like ranks 1 and 2, it will be very much, you know, a very, very incremental and small impact. You know, some you might, you know, rattle some people. When you get up to 3 and 4, maybe get some arrests or some people having to resign because of a very bad plot. But when you get up to like, you know, like rank 8, you know, mid-level corporations or governments may just simply, you know, lose power because of stories that get put out there.
Yeah. Like the whole idea is that your credibility scales the kind of impact you can have. That doesn't mean that stories you publish don't get listened to by people. It's just what does that then later lead to? So that would be my advice. Yeah, look at page 152 and 153 because it kind of breaks that down for every rank of credibility, and scale it appropriately. But yeah, they can change like everything. Like everyone, media is something my friends and I have talked about quite a bit, and it is, we agree, probably the most powerful role in the game at the higher ranks because of what it's capable of.
I guess, like, you know, the argument can be made, well, techs are able to invent anything you want. Well, yes, techs can have, you know, astronomically powerful shit that they can do.
Yes.
However, while that's all good, techs are hindered by one thing that medias are not: time. Medias can bide their time to drop something. They can also choose one other thing that the media in my Thursday morning group does. He doesn't tell the whole truth. He likes to, you know, smear. He likes to make it, you know, it looks almost correct.
Yeah.
But, you know, as media, you can make it look however you want.
Right. Yeah. So it's more just like, how well known's your name? How reputable are you? Like, that's what that impact is kind of measuring. So, all right. So cool. So we got that. And so, yeah, this last one, when do you decide to betray or not betray your players or the party as a whole?
Oh goodness. Is this as a player to player?
I think it has to do with the GM, because Tito asked this a little further up. So This is how he said it specifically. Everyone having someone to avenge them, that would come as a surprise to the player, but you can't keep doing it all the time. So basically, when we were talking earlier about, like, there will always be someone, you're killing someone's father, mother, son, daughter, relative, friend. Like, so how often do you bring that element in? And I guess, like, by consequence, the way I understood is, like, when you, the GM, decide to pull a knife in the back of your players, when and how often do you choose to run that play, essentially, so it doesn't become expected or old hat?
Well, first off, if you're playing Cyberpunk Red and you don't expect to get hurt, you're playing the wrong game.
True.
But when we're talking about things getting like real personal, this should be people that are tied in to your backstory, your enemy, your friends, and your tragic lovers. This should be you want to go and give your fixer the runaround, like, oh yeah, we found that, but we got a better price. Sure, that's all fun and games until another group of edge runners for that fixer comes into town, and then you become, the dirty laundry to get washed. I'm trying to think what other times does this work out. Of course, when you kill someone with a lot of influence, it would be very reasonable that they'd have people that would care about them,
or people who would just come in to like avenge them on principle alone. Like we had Petrochem come after us, followed very shortly by Max Tech at the end of the last gig we were doing in my real life group. So like that's because we killed the president of Biotechnica, or not Biotechnica, of Petrochem. So we killed one of the vice presidents of Petrochem, the corporation, and then Max Tech came after us for that. So yeah, that kind of stuff is like play for keeps, is like the way the book describes it. Understand that if your players do something big and important and they kill someone big and important, the big important people will come after them next.
Sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I described earlier with burning the little Jay's nest. Sure, that wasn't. So to make it clear, the media is known as Backslash. Backslash pals around with Magpie, one of the leaders of the Lil Jays, for the Haywood chapter. So Militech, in their intel power that they have, found that these two pal around a lot and decided to make that connection that these two, since they lived together, Magpie was somehow involved. And so, the woman that, was pulling her favors from Militech before, she had to leave, she decided to make it very personal. You killed my son. I'm going to destroy your livelihood. It's now, let's say you kill, I'm trying to think. You kill Cherub from the NCPD. Sure, you're going to get a little bit of a warrant, but they're not going to send, they're not going to send the tax squad out for, just a common blue shirt.
Right.
I don't know. Like killing of an average beat cop, probably not.
Probably not. I mean, their family might demand it, depending on the context. But yeah, a lot of it's very context dependent. Like John Boosterganger is not going to elicit the same vengeance response as the vice president of a corporation. Those are two very, very different worlds. Very different kind of enemy you're making when you make the choice. So I think that's the biggest thing, is like not every single death needs to be avenged by someone, but the ones who are really important, the leaders, the organizers, the ones that have a community at their back. This is why, like, I believe if you're going to name an NPC, beyond just like, oh yeah, that's Sparky the tech over there, and you come up with it on the fly out of nowhere, unless your players get really invested in the goings on of Sparky the tech, they're not going to care as much if something happens to them. So I think if it's like a named NPC that you expect them to care about, do two things for yourself. One, roll them a life path, because if they have a life path, they have things that matter to them, and you get to see what those look like, what their place in the world is, and that matters, right? Thing number two, make sure that if this is a character that should be getting in your player's way, instead of using a generic John Boosterganger, use this person. Like even tonight in Diamond's game, to use my character Uncle Larry, The guy who was waiting in my apartment was one of the enemies on my character sheet, even though he was a booster ganger who was dumb as fuck and just wore Kevlar and thought he was smarter than a corp. The fact that he showed up at all is because he was a personal enemy of mine. And I killed him just like my sheet said I would. So it's one of those things where like that thing matters, right? That element of like the enemies should be getting in your player's way. They should be mentioned. Their name should show up. They should inconvenience the players. If you make an enemy of the wrong person, they have the influence to like stop help from arriving potentially. So like if you call trauma team and all of a sudden you've wronged someone who has enough sway over them, they say, yeah, sorry, we can't dispatch to your area. Too much interference. Even if the skies are clear and the only thing that's stopping them is a handful of boosters on the other end. And your player will know the choice not to respond to your call was a personal one. That's when it matters. Because it doesn't matter how many times you do that to them. If it's personal, it's always personal. Like it's irrelevant how often that happens. If they're always making enemies, they'll always have someone personally coming for them. If they don't make many enemies, when it does happen, it'll be like that thing that they now have to contend with. It's a big deal.
I got one remark over here from Speepy Beans. John Booster Ganger is going to be in my next campaign for real. I am in Speepy Beans' next campaign, so it's like, oh boy. I get to meet John Booster Ganger.
Look forward to John Booster Ganger. He's a terribly effective shot, I've been told. Speepy, write that down.
All right. Oh no. No, for sure.
There it is. My God. I love it.
Oh boy.
That's the end. That's the end of the questions that we've had, though. So
I think that's a good note to wrap up on.
Yeah, very cool. So next week, before we go then, Diamond, did you have a topic that you were thinking about discussing next week?
So next week, I was looking at here. I am going to go ahead and remove that one from my list here.
Yeah.
Now this one, I hope this would probably not be something that causes too much issue, but I want to talk about something that's like a little more on the IRL side. The cost of entry. This has been a topic that's been showing up in like my Discord and other places. Cost of entry, you know, the books of book and PDF prices and TTRPGs, and you know, just like other things that we are coming across in the TTRPG world that cost things. I would like to actually discuss, like, you know, what we feel about the cost of some things.
Beautiful. Then I will put forward for mine next week. I want to talk about. Here we go. No, this is detailed breakdowns of our favorite tools from both RTG books and the game systems that we do use. Because then we can talk about that in why maybe we see a certain perceived value in Cyberpunk and like what that looks like. But like, okay. Yeah, what tools and things do we like about both the books that make up the game itself as well as some of the other elements around it, whether that's the DLC or other games like Cyborg or Blade Runner, like those types of things.
And I suppose it's just as a little teaser before we close off this episode. I'm not going to name names, but we have someone very, very important coming onto the episode, or on a special YouTube episode here pretty soon. You won't see it here on Twitch. It'll be on YouTube though. Yeah,
it won't be next week. Not next week's episode, but yeah, keep your eyes peeled. We'll say more next week, I think. But just so you know, we have someone important who's proactively contact us to be on the show, and I'm very, very excited about it. So, but yeah, with that said, again, everyone, thank you all for hanging out with us. If you were listening to this over on Spotify and you are not already a follower of Diamonds Are Mine, please follow us over on our Twitch channels, our YouTubes. We both have Discord communities that we're very active in. We were both GMs over on StartPlaying. If you'd like to book sessions with us, we would love to have you at our tables so we could teach you all the game and experience it with you. But with that said, I hope everyone has a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, and until next time, next week, same bad channel, same bad place. Peace.
Bye.